There's this void inside you, a hollow space that no achievement ever really fills, no praise quite reaches, no level of success can ever truly satisfy. You might have it all: the house, the car, the high-powered career, the seemingly perfect family. And yet, you still wake up in the dead of night with this nagging feeling that you're worthless, that everything you've achieved has been a fluke, that any minute now, sir, they're going to discover you're a complete fraud. This feeling, this void, it has a name. It has an origin. And yes, it has an explanation. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in history, dedicated a significant portion of his work to understanding how parents, especially narcissistic parents, can destroy their children's sense of self-worth. And what he discovered is both devastating and, ultimately, liberating. Devastating, because it reveals just how deep the damage can go. Liberating, because it shows that healing, real healing, is always possible. 3 international studies, all published in 2023, confirmed what Jung intuited decades ago. Children raised by narcissistic parents often develop permanent damage to their self-esteem. They grow up feeling like they don't deserve to exist, that they take up too much space, that they're fundamentally, irrevocably defective. And the worst part is, they often don't even know why they feel this way. They think they were born this way. They think it's just part of who they are. They don't realize they've been programmed, conditioned, to feel worthless. Today, I'm going to reveal the 6 invisible mechanisms that narcissistic parents use to systematically destroy their children's sense of self-worth. I'm going to explain exactly how each mechanism works, and I'm going to share what Jung discovered about how to rebuild that stolen sense of self-value, how to get it back if you recognize that void, if you feel that emptiness. Please stick around until the very end, because the most important revelation, the key to unlocking your healing, comes in the final minutes. The first mechanism is destructive comparison. Narcissistic parents are always comparing. Look how dedicated your brother is. Why can't you be more like Sarah, the neighbor's daughter? At your age, I was already working full-time. It seems like motivation. It seems like the parent wants to help, to inspire, to push their child to be better. But the effect is exactly the opposite. Each comparison tells the child that they are not enough, just as they are, that they need to be someone else, something else, to have value, that who they are, inherently, simply isn't good enough. And the child internalizes this. They begin to compare themselves obsessively to classmates, to celebrities, to idealized versions of themselves that will never exist. And they always lose the comparison. Always. Because no matter what they do, there's always someone better. And if the standard for worth is being better than everyone else, they will never feel worthy. Jung called this identification with an impossible ideal. The child stops striving to be who they are and starts striving to be an ideal that doesn't exist. It's like trying to catch the horizon. The more they run, the further it recedes. Let me tell you about Ethan. Ethan was 11 years old when his father started constantly comparing him to his older cousin. His cousin was an athlete. He got straight A's. He was incredibly popular. He was everything Ethan's father wanted Ethan to be. But Ethan was different. He loved to draw. He was introverted. He preferred books to sports. He had few friends, but they were deep, meaningful friendships. His father saw no value in that. Every week it was the same thing. Your cousin won another trophy. Your cousin got into med school. Your cousin is dating such a beautiful girl. And Ethan just shrunk. Each comparison was like a knife twisting inside him. Each compliment to his cousin was a direct criticism of him. At 40 years old, Ethan was an internationally recognized artist. He had exhibitions in major galleries. He had created a life that perfectly aligned with who he was, but he still felt that void. He still woke up feeling like he wasn't enough. He still compared himself obsessively to other artists, He still thought his achievements were insignificant. In therapy, Ethan had to confront his father's voice, that critical voice that was still comparing, that was still telling him he should be different, that was still devaluing everything he had built. And he had to create a new voice, a voice that recognized his unique path, that celebrated his choices, that saw value in who he was, not in who he should be. The second mechanism is chronic criticism. Narcissistic parents criticize everything: the way you eat, the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you breathe. Nothing is ever good enough. Nothing is ever sufficient. There's always something to correct, and there's always something wrong. And the child learns that they are fundamentally, inherently defective, that there's no version of them that's acceptable, that they need to change everything about themselves to have any value. Jung identified this as the creation of a pathological inner critic. The parent's voice enters the child's psyche and becomes permanently installed, and that voice continues to criticize forever, even when the parent dies, even when the child becomes an adult, even when there's no one left criticizing from the outside. The inner critic does the job all by itself. Researchers confirm this. Studies show that adults who grew up with chronic criticism have elevated levels of cortisol. Even in non-threatening situations, their bodies remain in a constant state of alert, waiting for the next attack. Even when the attack isn't coming from the outside, it's coming from within. Ashley was 32 years old and a perfectionist to the extreme. She'd revise emails 10 times before sending them. She'd check her work countless times. She was never satisfied with anything she produced. It seemed like dedication. It seemed like professionalism. But it was terror. Ashley was constantly afraid of making mistakes, because in her childhood, every mistake was punished, every imperfection was highlighted, every flaw was proof that she was worthless. Ashley's father never hit her. He never yelled. He just criticized, calmly, consistently, implacably. That dish isn't washed properly. That room isn't tidy enough. That grade isn't good enough. That drawing isn't pretty enough. And Ashley internalized it. She became her own worst critic. She did to herself exactly what her father had done, and her father didn't even need to be present anymore. In therapy, Ashley discovered that her perfectionism was a prison. She thought that if she did everything perfectly, she would finally have value, but perfection doesn't exist, so she never felt worthy. The healing came when Ashley learned to tolerate imperfection, to hand in work that was good enough, to accept that mistakes are part of life, and that making mistakes doesn't mean she's worthless. The third mechanism is emotional neglect. This is perhaps the most invisible of all, because it doesn't involve action. It involves absence. It's the parent who is physically present but emotionally absent, who doesn't ask how your day was, who isn't interested in your dreams, who looks through you as if you were transparent. The child who suffers emotional neglect learns something devastating. They learn that they're not important enough to be noticed, that their feelings don't matter, that their existence is irrelevant, and this destroys their sense of worth even more deeply than criticism. Because criticism at least acknowledges that you exist, neglect tells you that you don't even matter. There's a void inside you, an emptiness that no achievement seems to fill, no compliment quite reaches, no success truly satisfies. This video will delve into the origins of this feeling, providing explanations rooted in the work of Carl Jung. Jung wrote extensively about the need for mirroring in childhood. A child needs to see in their parents' eyes that they are real, that they are important, that they deserve attention. When this doesn't happen, the child develops what Jung called a fragmented self. They can't form a solid notion of who they are, because no one ever reflected that back to them. Ethan was the fourth child of 5. His parents were always busy, with work, with the other kids, with their own problems. Ethan learned early on that no one had time for him. He took care of himself, solved his own problems, didn't bother anyone. It looked like independence. It looked like maturity. It was survival. At 38, Ethan was incapable of asking for help, incapable of expressing needs, incapable of believing that anyone cared about him. And the void was constant. The sensation of being invisible, of not mattering, of being able to disappear and no one would notice. In therapy, Ethan needed to learn to be seen, to ask for attention, to believe that his needs were legitimate. It was a slow process because the programming was deep. The belief that he didn't matter was entrenched, but little by little, Ethan learned to occupy space, to say what he needed, to exist fully. The fourth mechanism is conditional love. We've already talked about this in the previous video, but I need to delve deeper here in relation to self-worth. When love is conditional, worth is too. The child learns that they only have value when they do what their parents want, when they get good grades, when they behave well, when they perform, and when they fail. They lose love, and they lose their sense of worth along with it. This creates a devastating connection between performance and self-value. The person spends their entire life trying to conquer value through achievements, more degrees and more money, more success, more recognition, but it's never enough, because the value conquered is not real value. It's borrowed value. It's validation that needs to be renewed constantly through more achievements. Jung called this ego inflation. The ego grows to compensate for the void in the self. The person identifies with their achievements. They are their achievements. And when they fail, they crumble. Because without the achievements, there's nothing left. Recent neuroscience studies show that people raised with conditional love have different activation of the brain's reward system. They need increasingly higher doses of validation to feel the same level of satisfaction. It's exactly like an addiction. Ashley was a successful executive. At 45, she had it all: an important position, a high salary, professional recognition, and she was completely empty. Each promotion gave temporary relief, a few days of feeling valued. Then the void would return, and she needed to seek the next achievement. Ashley's parents were very clear. Love was for those who deserved it, and deserving meant achieving, meant being the best, meant never failing. Ashley never failed. Externally, internally, she was a black hole. In therapy, Ashley needed to confront something terrifying. She needed to ask herself, who am I without my achievements? And the initial answer was, no one, nothing, empty. But little by little, Ashley discovered that there was something beyond. There was a person with tastes, with values, with humanity, a person who had value simply by existing, not by achieving. This discovery changed everything. The fifth mechanism is shadow projection. Jung developed the concept of the shadow to describe the parts of ourselves that we deny, the impulses that we repress, the aspects that we reject, what we don't want to see. Narcissistic parents project their shadow onto their children. They see in their children everything they hate in themselves and attack it. The father who hates himself for being cowardly calls his son a coward. The mother who hates herself for being selfish accuses her daughter of selfishness, and the child absorbs it. They believe that they are what they're told they are. And the most cruel thing is that often the child is none of that. They're carrying the weight of something that isn't even theirs. They're being punished for their parents' sins. Leonardo grew up being called weak. His father was military, valued strength, toughness, emotional control. And Leonardo was sensitive, cried at movies, got emotional with music, felt deeply. The father didn't tolerate it. Weak, sissy. You need to be a man. Leonardo spent 20 years trying to be what his father wanted. He joined the army, suppressed emotions, built an armor, and inside, he was dying. The sensitivity didn't disappear. It went into the shadow, and from there, it sabotaged everything. In therapy, Leonardo discovered something important. The sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was strength. The ability to feel deeply was a gift. The father called it weakness because the father was afraid of his own sensitivity. He projected onto his children what he couldn't accept in himself. Leonardo wasn't weak. The father was. And Leonardo had carried that projection for decades. Leonardo's healing came when he recovered his sensitivity, when he allowed it to come out of the shadow, when he discovered that he could be strong and sensitive at the same time. The sixth mechanism is the most subtle of all. It's what I call the absence of delight. Children need something very specific to develop a sense of worth. They need to see in their parents' eyes that their mere existence brings joy, not for something they did, not for some achievement, just for existing. This look of unconditional delight tells the child, you have value simply for being who you are. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to prove anything. Your existence is enough. Narcissistic parents don't offer this. They look at their children seeking what the children can give, what the children can do for them, how the children can satisfy their need. The child is never seen for who they are, only for what they can offer. And this creates the deepest void of all. The sensation that you don't deserve to exist, that you need to justify your existence all the time, that if you stop producing, stop pleasing, stop performing, you'll disappear, because without unconditional delight, the child never receives the most important message, the message that they have intrinsic value, value that doesn't depend on anything external, value that simply is. Anna was 50 years old and had a seemingly perfect life, stable marriage, successful children, accomplished career. But Anna felt that she didn't really exist. She felt like a ghost, that if she stopped doing things, she would evaporate. Anna's mother never looked at her with delight. Anna was the eldest daughter, the responsible one, the one who took care of her siblings, the one who helped at home, the one who didn't cause trouble. Anna was useful. She was never loved for being Anna. She was loved for being useful. And 50 years later, Anna was still trying to be useful to her husband, to her children, to her friends, for anyone who needed it. Because deep down, Ashley believed that if she stopped being useful, no one would want her around, because no one had ever wanted her around just for being her. In therapy, Ashley had to confront the biggest lie of her life, the lie that she had no intrinsic value, the lie that she needed to justify her existence. It was painful, because this lie had been the foundation of everything, of her choices, of her relationships, of her identity. But slowly, Ashley discovered something that had always been there. She discovered that she had value, not for being useful, but for being her, just for existing. There's another case I need to share, because it illustrates how these mechanisms affect generations. Ethan was 47 years old when he realized he was doing to his children exactly what his father had done to him. He criticized. He compared. He was never satisfied. He looked at his children seeking what they could do, not who they were. Ethan didn't want to be like this. Consciously, he hated his father for having done this. But unconsciously, he repeated it. The paternal complex was in control. Carl Jung explained this phenomenon in detail. He called it unconscious identification with the aggressor. The child who was destroyed by their parents grows up and destroys their own children, not out of malice, but out of programming. And the most tragic thing is that the person often knows they are doing harm. Ethan saw the fear in his children's eyes, saw the same expression he had as a child, and he hated it. But he couldn't stop. The pattern was automatic. It was stronger than his conscious will. In therapy, Ethan had to do deep work. He needed to confront his own wound before he could stop hurting his children. He needed to recognize that he was both victim and perpetrator. That's hard to accept. No one wants to see themselves as a perpetrator. But without that honesty, the cycle continues. Ethan stopped criticizing his children. He started looking at them with genuine curiosity. He started asking what they felt. He started celebrating who they were, not what they did. It was strange at first. The children didn't trust it. They expected the criticism that always came. It took time for them to realize that something had really changed. But it did change, and the next generation won't carry the same wound. That's the true healing, not just personal, generational. There is yet another aspect that Carl Jung emphasized about self-worth. When a child grows up without intrinsic value, they develop what he called utilitarian value. They only have value when they are useful to someone, when they produce, not when they serve, and this makes them extremely vulnerable to exploitation. People who grew up without intrinsic value often end up in abusive relationships, in exploitative jobs, in situations where they are used, because they don't know they deserve better. They think being used is normal. They think they need to be grateful for any scrap of attention they receive. As Jessica stayed in an abusive marriage for 15 years, her husband constantly belittled her, isolated her from her friends, controlled her money. And Jessica thought she was lucky to have someone, thought no one else would want her, thought that the little she received was more than she deserved, because Jessica's mother never looked at her with delight, never said she had value, never made Jessica feel like she deserved to exist. When she finally left the marriage, Jessica discovered something shocking. She discovered that she deserved more. She discovered that being treated with respect wasn't a luxury, it was a basic right. She discovered that her value didn't depend on having someone by her side. This discovery took years, because the programming was deep. But it happened. And when it happened, Jessica never again allowed herself to be treated that way, because she finally knew she was worth more. There's also an important neurological aspect that I need to mention. Recent research shows that the absence of parental validation in childhood physically affects the brain. Areas related to self-esteem and self-image become underdeveloped. Neural connections that should exist don't form. This means that the sensation of not having value isn't just psychological, it's neurological. It's inscribed in the brain. But here's the good news. The brain is plastic. It can change. New neural pathways can be created at any age. This means that healing is possible, not just as an idea, as a physical reality. The brain can be reprogrammed, and the reprogramming happens through repeated corrective experiences. Every time someone looks at you with genuine delight, every time you're valued for who you are, every time you receive unconditional love, these experiences create new pathways, and slowly, the old pathways weaken. The pattern of not having value loses force, and that's why therapy works. That's why healthy relationships heal. That's why change is possible. You're not condemned to carry this void forever. Your brain can change. Your sense of worth can be rebuilt. Now that you know the 6 mechanisms, I need to explain how they connect. None of these mechanisms operates alone. They combine. They reinforce each other. They create a web of destruction that is almost impossible to escape without help. The child is compared and criticized. They are neglected and loved conditionally. They carry the shadow of their parents and never receive unconditional delight. And each mechanism reinforces the same message: you are worthless. That message goes deep. It goes to the core of being. And from there, it influences everything, every choice, every relationship, every thought about oneself. Carl Jung called this a primary narcissistic wound, a wound so deep that it molds the entire structure of the personality. The person doesn't have a wound. The person is built around the wound. But here's the good news. The wound can be healed. The value can be rebuilt. The message can be replaced. Carl Jung dedicated the second half of his career to developing methods for this. He called the process individuation. It's the path back to the true self. The first step is recognizing the programming. You need to see clearly that the sensation of not having value wasn't born with you. It was implanted. You need to identify which of the 6 mechanisms were used, and it was probably more than one. This recognition already changes everything. Because when you see the programming, it loses part of its power. It stops being absolute truth and becomes a lie that was told so many times that it seemed true. The second step is grief. You need to grieve for the childhood you didn't have, for the unconditional love you never received, for the delight you never saw in your parents' eyes. This grief is painful. Many people resist it. They often prefer to keep believing their parents did their best, preferring not to confront the harsh reality. But without grieving, there can be no real healing. You need to acknowledge what you've lost before you can begin to rebuild. The third step is reparenting. You can't change the past. You can't get from your parents what they were incapable of giving, but you can give it to yourself now. Reparenting means looking at yourself with unconditional delight. It means telling yourself you have value simply because you exist. It means stopping the cycle of tying self-worth to performance. In the beginning, it feels fake. It feels like you're lying to yourself. But with practice, the new message starts to gain strength. It starts to compete with the old programming. It starts to forge new neural pathways. The fourth step is confronting your shadow. Remember the projections from your parent, the parts of yourself that were attacked and banished. They reside in your shadow, and they need to be rescued. This means reclaiming the sensitivity that was labeled weakness, reclaiming the dreams that were ridiculed, reclaiming the parts of yourself your parents didn't want to see. Shadow integration isn't easy. These parts were banished for a reason. Bringing them back activates me. Fear activates me. Shame activates the father's voice. So screaming that you're wrong, but it's necessary, because complete self-worth only comes from complete integration. You can't truly value yourself while rejecting essential parts of yourself. The fifth step is conscious, repeated choice. Knowledge isn't enough. Insight isn't enough. You need to act differently. Every single day. This means choosing not to engage in destructive comparison when the compulsion arises, choosing to tolerate imperfection when perfectionism attacks, choosing to ask for help when internalized emotional neglect whispers that you don't deserve attention. Each different choice weakens the old programming and strengthens the new pattern. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes this patience, but it is possible. There's a practical exercise that really helps in this process. Every day in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror and say out loud, I have value, not because of anything I do, but because of who I am. In the beginning, it'll feel ridiculous. That critical inner voice will scoff. It will say you're lying. It will say it's foolish. Ignore that voice. That's the father's voice, and that's the old programming, trying to cling on. Keep saying it, every day, even when it feels fake, even when the voice laughs, even when you don't believe it. Because over time, something shifts. The new message begins to take root. It starts to compete with the old one. It starts to gain power. And one day, you'll look in the mirror and believe it. You'll feel in your body that you have value. You'll know, not just think, that you deserve to exist. That day changes everything. Another vital exercise is to make a list. Write down all the ways you were convinced you had no self-worth, every destructive comparison, every instance of chronic criticism, every moment of emotional neglect, every condition imposed to receive validation. Then, next to each item, write the truth. If your father constantly compared you to your brother, write, I have my own unique path. Comparison doesn't measure my inherent worth. If your mother criticized everything you did, write, to err is human. Imperfection doesn't diminish my value. If you experienced emotional neglect, write, I deserved attention and care. The neglect was their failing, not mine. If love felt conditional, write, I deserve unconditional love. My self-worth isn't dependent on performance or achievement. Read this list regularly, especially on difficult days, especially when the empty space returns, especially when the old programming attacks. This list is a reminder. an antidote to the lie that was planted. Another exercise I highly recommend is seeking out corrective experiences. Corrective experiences are moments where you receive what you lacked in childhood, where someone looks at you with genuine delight, where you are valued simply for existing. These experiences can come from a therapist, a healthy partner, a true friend, a support group, anywhere where you feel seen and valued for who you truly are. Actively seek out these experiences, because each one heals a little. Each one creates new neural pathways. Each one weakens the old programming. You don't have to do this alone. In fact, it's almost impossible to do it entirely on your own. Self-worth is constructed in relationship. It was damaged in relationship, and it needs to be rebuilt in relationship. That's why therapy is so important. That's why healthy relationships are so important. That's why community is so important. You need people who see your value, who reflect your value back to you, who offer the mirroring that was missing in childhood. And when you find these people, let them in. Let them see you. Let them validate you. I know it's difficult. The programming says you don't deserve it, that you'll disappoint them, that they'll discover you're worthless. But the programming lies. It has always lied. You do have value. You do deserve it. You are worthy of love and connection. And here is the most important revelation of all. The self-worth you seek has never been external. It has never resided in achievements. It has never resided in the approval of others. It has never resided in being better than anyone else. That self-worth has always been within you. You were born with it. It's part of you, as fundamental as your very breath. Your parents didn't destroy your self-worth. They merely convinced you that you lacked it. They blinded you to what has always been there. The cure isn't to create self-worth. It's to rediscover the self-worth that has always existed. Jung called this reconnecting with the self, the center of your psyche, that exists before any conditioning, before any programming, before any wound. This self has never been damaged. It has been hidden, it has been buried, it has been forgotten, but it has never been destroyed. And when you find it, when you reconnect with it, something magical happens. The empty space disappears. The incessant search for validation ceases. The need to prove your worth vanishes, because you finally know, not just intellectually, but in your body, in your soul, in your entire being, that you have value, that you always have, that you always will. Not because of something you do, but because of who you are. If you've made it this far, you've already taken the first step. You've acknowledged the programming. Now, the journey continues. That value is within you. It always has been. You just need to remember